The plasma bolt missed Lyra's head by centimeters, scorching the metal wall behind her. She dove behind a cargo container as another volley tore through the diplomatic chamber. Her husband Jake moved like liquid lightning, his hand already drawing the pulse pistol from beneath his formal jacket. The Valthene Empire's soldiers poured through the breached doorway, their crimson armor gleaming under emergency lights. This was supposed to be a peace summit. Lyra had married Jake 6 months ago to cement the alliance between humanity and her people, the Koratai Union. She had chosen him from the diplomatic corps because his file showed restraint, patience, and 2 decades of negotiation experience. What the file hadn't mentioned was why he'd left Earth's military 20 years prior. Jake fired twice. 2 soldiers dropped smoking holes in their faceplates. He moved toward Lyra without breaking stride, his movements efficient and terrifyingly calm. She had never seen this version of him. In their months together, he had been gentle, thoughtful, always measured in his words and actions. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice carrying none of the warmth she knew. This was something else entirely. The Valthene commander stepped through the smoke, his translator crackling, "The human diplomat and the Karate princess. Your union ends today. The Valthene Empire will not tolerate this alliance." Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. The Koratai were scholars, artists, philosophers. They had spent 10,000 years pursuing knowledge while avoiding conflict. It was why they needed humanity's protection. It was why she had agreed to this arranged marriage. Jake didn't respond to the commander. He simply moved. What happened next seemed impossible. Jake crossed 15 meters in seconds, sliding beneath a burst of plasma fire. His pistol spoke 4 times, and 4 soldiers collapsed. He grabbed a fallen rifle, rolled behind a podium, and fired a sustained burst that forced the entire Valthene squad to scatter. Lyra watched in stunned horror as her husband dismantled the enemy force. He used angles she didn't understand, moved through firing lanes that should have killed him, and struck with precision that seemed almost prescient. When a soldier tried to flank him, Jake threw a ceremonial knife without looking, catching the Valthene in the throat joint of his armor. The commander roared in rage, charging forward with an energy blade. Jake dropped the rifle, drew a second pistol, and shot the blade from the commander's hand. Before the Valthene could react, Jake was inside his guard, driving an elbow into the helmet's vision port. The reinforced glass cracked. Jake grabbed the stunned commander and threw him into 3 advancing soldiers. "East corridor now!" Jake barked at Lyra. She ran. Behind her, she heard the sounds of combat. Weapons fire, impacts, the crackling of energy shields failing. When Jake caught up to her 30 seconds later, he wasn't even breathing hard. His formal jacket was scorched in 3 places, but he moved like he'd just stepped out of a conference room. "What are you?" Lyra gasped. Jake's expression softened slightly. "Later. Right now, we need to reach the emergency shuttle." More soldiers flooded the corridor ahead. Jake pushed Lyra into a side room and sealed the door. Through the small window, she watched him face a dozen Valthene warriors alone. They had married for peace, to prevent war between their peoples and the encroaching empire. Now Lyra understood the terrible truth. She hadn't married a diplomat who could fight. She had married something far more dangerous, a weapon disguised as a man, and the Valthene Empire had just made the fatal mistake of forcing him to reveal what he truly was. The battle in the corridor lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, Jake opened the door, extended his hand to her, and said quietly, "We should go." Lyra took his hand, her entire understanding of her husband shattered and reforming into something she couldn't yet comprehend. Between them and safety stood 200 Valthene shock troops, the Empire's best warriors, and Commander Vex Thorin, the butcher of the Kepler Nebula. Jake reloaded his pistol and started walking. Lyra followed, her hand finding the small ceremonial blade at her waist. She had married this human for peace, but she was about to learn what humans became when peace failed. The alarm klaxons wailed through the station corridors as Jake moved with purpose, his boots silent despite their speed. Lyra struggled to keep pace, her ornate Peace Summit robes tangling around her legs. She tore the lower half away, revealing the simple bodysuit beneath. Her people didn't believe in practical clothing for ceremonies, another luxury of a species that hadn't fought a real war in millennia. "How many are between us and the shuttle?" Lyra asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Jake didn't slow. Station security detected approximately 200 hostiles. They've locked down levels 7 through 12. We're on 14.2, Lyra repeated. The number seemed absurd. "Jake, we need to call for help. The Cority fleet can be here in 6 hours. We'll be dead in 30 minutes if we wait." Jake stopped at an intersection, checking both directions with movements too smooth to be casual training. The Valthene didn't come here to negotiate. This was an execution. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. The Peace Summit had been her idea, her hope to bring the three powers together. The Valthene Empire had been expanding aggressively for 50 years, consuming smaller civilizations. The Karate Union possessed technology and knowledge the Empire wanted. Humanity offered military strength the Karate lacked. Together, they could resist Valthene aggression. Or so she had believed. "They played us," she said bitterly. "They played me," Jake corrected. "You were genuine. I should have seen this coming." He started moving again, taking a maintenance shaft that angled downward. The Empire has been too quiet for 3 months. No border skirmishes, no probe attacks. I mistook patience for acceptance. Lyra dropped into the shaft behind him, her athletic frame handling the descent easily. "You couldn't have known. It's my job to know." Jake's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. 23 years I've been keeping people alive through diplomacy. The one time I let my guard down and they nearly kill my wife. My wife. The words shouldn't have warmed her in this moment, but they did. Their marriage had been political necessity, carefully arranged by their respective governments. Lyra had expected professional courtesy, perhaps friendship over time. She hadn't expected the quiet kindness Jake had shown her, the way he learned about karate customs, how he always remembered that she preferred her quarters at lower temperature and higher humidity. She certainly hadn't expected whatever this was. They emerged on level 12 to the sound of marching boots. Jake held up his fist and Lyra froze. Through a grated floor panel, she could see Valthene soldiers below, organized in tight formations. Their crimson armor was heavier than standard issue, reinforced plating designed for extended combat. "Shock troops," Jake murmured. "Vex Thorin's personal legion." "I've heard of him," Lyra whispered. "He destroyed the colony at New Petra. 15,000 civilians?" 17,000, Jake corrected, his jaw tight. "I was part of the investigation team. What he did there?" He trailed off, then shook his head. "Stay close. We're changing tactics." Before Lyra could ask what he meant, Jake was moving. He didn't head toward the emergency shuttle bay. Instead, he went deeper into the station's maintenance level, navigating with the confidence of someone who had memorized every schematic.
"Where are we going?" Lyra asked.
"Cargo Bay 6. There's a supply runner docked there. Automated system. The Valthene won't have bothered securing it because it requires command codes to operate, which we don't have." Jake smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I've been a diplomat for 20 years, Lyra. Before that, I was something else. Something that required knowing how to access ships without proper authorization." They reached Cargo Bay 6 through a service tunnel that reeked of recycled air and industrial lubricant. Jake cracked the access panel and peered through. Lyra looked over his shoulder and saw the sleek supply runner, its hull unmarked and engines cold. Between them and the ship stood a problem. 12 Valthene soldiers guarded the bay, their weapons trained on the main entrance. They weren't expecting anyone to come from the maintenance tunnels, but they were professional enough to maintain overlapping fields of fire.
"I can't shoot through 12 soldiers before they return fire," Jake said quietly, more to himself than to her.
"The bay's too open, no cover between here and the ship." "Then we wait for them to leave," Lyra suggested. "They won't. Thuron's thorough. He'll have guards on every possible exit until he finds us." Jake studied the bay layout, his eyes moving with tactical precision. "I need you to do something, and you're not going to like it. Tell me. When I give the signal, I need you to run for that ship. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't try to help me." Just get to the airlock and start the pre-flight sequence. Code is 77 Delta 9 Charlie 6. Lyra grabbed his arm. I'm not leaving you. Jake turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. It wasn't fear or resignation. It was the cold calculation of someone who had done this before, who knew exactly what it would cost, and had already accepted the price. Listen to me carefully, he said. In about 90 seconds, I'm going to do something that will get their attention. All of their attention. You'll have maybe 40 seconds to reach that ship and seal the airlock. If you hesitate, if you try to help, we both die. Do you understand? Jake, there are 12 of them. You can't possibly. I've fought worse odds. His voice was gentle now, almost apologetic. I'm sorry you have to see this part of me. I worked very hard to bury it. Before she could respond, Jake kissed her. It was brief, fierce, and tasted like goodbye. Then he pressed his pistol into her hand, keeping only the rifle he'd taken earlier. 40 seconds, he repeated. Promise me. Lyra's throat was tight. I promise. Jake nodded once, then turned to the access panel. He took 3 deep breaths each, one slower than the last. His shoulders relaxed. His grip on the rifle shifted into something practiced and familiar. When he looked back at her one last time, the diplomat was completely gone. What remained was the weapon her husband had been before, the soldier he tried to leave behind. Now, he said, and kicked open the panel. What happened next would be burned into Lyra's memory forever. Jake didn't run into the cargo bay. He exploded into it, moving faster than she thought possible. His first shot took down the nearest soldier before anyone could react. His second and third shots disabled the bay's main lights, plunging the space into emergency lighting. Lyra ran. She heard the Valthene soldiers shouting, heard the distinctive crack of energy weapons, heard Jake's rifle singing its deadly song. She didn't look back. She had promised. 30 meters to the ship. 20. The airlock was open, systems on standby. Behind her, the sounds of combat were brutal and efficient. Jake wasn't just fighting. He was dismantling an entire squad with surgical precision. 10 meters. 5. Lyra reached the airlock and spun around, unable to help herself. Through the chaos and flickering lights, she saw Jake moving like death itself. He used the cargo containers as cover, struck from unexpected angles, and turned the Valthene's superior numbers into a liability as they blocked each other's shots trying to track him. A soldier appeared at the ship's ramp, raising his weapon toward Lyra. Jake's rifle barked once from across the bay, and the soldier dropped. Jake's eyes met hers for a fraction of a second. Run, his expression said. Lyra entered the ship and started the pre-flight sequence with shaking hands. Outside, Jake ran out of ammunition. He dropped the rifle without hesitation, drew the energy blade from the fallen soldier, and charged the remaining Valthene. What followed wasn't a fight. It was an execution, brutal and unstoppable. When the last soldier fell, Jake sprinted for the ship, boots pounding against the deck. He dove through the airlock just as plasma bolts stitched the hole behind him. Lyra slammed the seal control, and the door hissed shut. Jake lay on the deck, breathing hard for the first time. His jacket was gone, his shirt torn and scorched. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, and his hands were shaking with adrenaline. Get us out of here, he managed. Lyra was already at the controls. The supply runner's engines roared to life, and the ship lurched forward. The cargo bay's external doors were sealed, but Jake had planned for that. He'd set charges while fighting small explosive packs he'd taken from fallen soldiers. They detonated in perfect sequence, blowing the bay doors outward. The ship shot into space, pursued by Valthene fighters that had been stationed around the diplomatic station. Lyra had trained as a pilot during her youth, back when she dreamed of exploration instead of politics. Those skills returned now as she threw the small ship into evasive maneuvers. Jump drive? She called back. Jake had pulled himself to his feet and was working the navigation console. Charging. 90 seconds.com. A plasma bolt rocked the ship. Shields dropped to 60%. We're not going to make it, Lyra said, watching 3 more fighters close in. Yes, we are. Jake's fingers flew across the console. I'm rerouting power from life support to shields. We can hold our breath for 90 seconds. The ship shuddered under sustained fire. Shields at 40%. 30. 20. Jump drive ready, Jake announced. Where are we going? Jake looked up, and despite everything they'd just survived, he smiled. Earth. It's time my people met my wife properly. And it's time the Valthene Empire learned what humanity does to those who threaten our families. Reality twisted, and the stars stretched into lines of light. Behind them, the diplomatic station and its Valthene attackers vanished into the distance. In the sudden quiet of jump space, Lyra finally allowed herself to shake. Jake moved to her side, his hand finding hers. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for all of this. Lyra looked at him. This man she'd married for political convenience, who had just killed 20 soldiers to keep her alive. Who are you, Jake? Really? He was quiet for a long moment. Before I became a diplomat, I was a soldier. Special operations, deep strike teams, I did things I'm not proud of, saw things I wish I could forget. When the war with the Centauri coalition ended, I retired. Became a diplomat because I thought I could do more good with words than weapons. He touched the cut on his forehead, wincing slightly. Guess some things don't change. You saved my life. You're my wife. There was never another option. Jake met her eyes. I meant what I said. We're going to Earth and we're going to end this. The Valthene thought attacking a peace summit would break our alliance. All they've done is guarantee we'll hit back harder than they can imagine. Lyra thought about the soldier she'd just witnessed, multiplied by Earth's entire military force. The Valthene Empire had spent 50 years conquering weaker species, growing fat on easy victories. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. What happens when we reach Earth? She asked. Jake's expression hardened into something that would have terrified her 6 hours ago. Now it just made her feel safe. We go to war, and I show the Valthene what happens when you threaten the people I love. The ship hurtled through jump space toward Earth, carrying 2 survivors of a massacre and the beginning of a war that would reshape the galaxy. The supply runner dropped out of jump space 3 astronomical units from Earth per standard naval protocol. Immediately, 6 destroyers appeared on the scanner, their weapons hot and targeting systems locked onto the small ship. Unknown vessel, you have violated Earth's defensive perimeter. A crisp voice announced over the comm, identify yourself immediately or be fired upon. Jake activated the transmission with the calm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. This is Jake Morrison, Diplomatic Corps, Clearance Code, Whiskey Tango, 77 Echo. I'm declaring a priority Alpha situation and requesting immediate military escort to Fleet Command. There was a pause. Then, stand by for verification. Lyra watched the destroyers holding formation around them, their weapons still locked. Each ship was twice the size of the Corati Union's largest cruiser, bristling with armaments that made her people's defensive fleet look like ceremonial toys. Verification confirmed, the voice returned, notably more respectful. Commander Morrison, we're reading combat damage to your vessel and detecting Valthene weapons signatures on your hull. Are you under active pursuit? Negative. We jumped clean. Jake's hands moved across the console, transmitting data. I'm sending you tactical intelligence on a Valthene attack against the neutral diplomatic station at Kepler Pull Forward 2. They massacred everyone at the peace summit. My wife and I are the only survivors. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it belonged to someone else. Older and carrying the weight of command. Jake Morrison. This is Admiral Patricia Cheng. I'm glad you made it out alive. We're dispatching a medical frigate to your position and preparing quarters at Fleet Command. Be advised your transmission is being forwarded directly to the Security Council. Understood, Admiral. And Jake, welcome home. The destroyers arranged themselves in an escort formation, their presence both protective and threatening. Lyra found herself gripping the armrests of her seat as Earth grew larger in the view screen. She'd seen images, of course, studied the blue and green world in preparation for her marriage. Seeing it in person was different. This was humanity's cradle, the world that had birthed a species which had gone from primitive tool use to faster-than-light travel in less than 10,000 years, a species that had learned to make war with terrifying efficiency. The medical frigate met them halfway to Earth's moon. Doctors and technicians swarmed aboard the supply runner, scanning both Jake and Lyra with instruments that beeped and hummed. A medic pressed a dermal patch onto Jake's forehead, and the cut sealed itself within seconds. "You've got 3 cracked ribs, Commander," the chief medical officer reported. "Some minor plasma burns, elevated stress hormones, and you're running on about 4 hours of sleep in the last 72. I'm recommending immediate bed rest." Jake shook his head. "Negative. I need to debrief with Fleet Command." "Sir, with respect, you're in no condition, Doctor," Jake interrupted, his voice quiet but absolute. "The Valthene Empire just committed an act of war against a neutral station, killing diplomats from 17 different species. They did this 3 days before the Unity Accords were set to be signed, accords that would have created a defensive alliance capable of stopping their expansion. Every hour we delay gives them time to prepare for retaliation, or to spin this as something other than the massacre it was. I'm going to Fleet Command. You can patch me up along the way." The doctor looked at Lyra as if hoping she might intervene. She just shook her head. She was beginning to understand her husband. When he used that tone, the discussion was over. They transferred to the frigate, which accelerated hard toward Earth's orbital command station. Lyra stood at the observation window, watching her new home world grow closer. Beside her, Jake had changed from his ruined formal clothes into a uniform that had been waiting in his temporary quarters. She'd never seen him in military dress before. The dark blue fabric fit him perfectly, decorated with medals and service ribbons she didn't recognize. "You were a commander," she said quietly. "Still am, technically. Military retirement in the diplomatic corps means you retain your rank and can be recalled if needed." He touched one of the ribbons, a simple black and silver bar. "This one's from the Titan offensive. My team held a colony against overwhelming odds for 6 days until reinforcements arrived." "How many were in your team?" "Started with 12. 3 of us walked out." Lyra absorbed that. "And now you're walking back into this world, back into war." Jake turned to face her fully. "I need to know if you're with me on this. The Security Council is going to want revenge for what happened. They're going to authorize military action, probably a full-scale assault on Valthene positions. It's going to be brutal, and it's going to cost lives on both sides. If you tell me to stand down, if you say the Corridor Union doesn't want this fight, I'll honor that. We can find another way." Lyra thought about the peace summit, about the diplomats she'd known who had died in the attack. She thought about Ambassador Kethra of the Milvani Compact, who had 3 children, about Chancellor Wex of the Helion Republic, who had been working on this alliance for 5 years, about all the others whose only crime had been believing peace was possible. "The Corridor Union has spent 10,000 years avoiding conflict," she said slowly. "We've survived by being useful, by trading knowledge and technology, by making ourselves too valuable to destroy. But the Valthene don't care about value. They care about power." She met Jake's eyes. "My people chose me to marry you because I was willing to do what needed to be done for our survival. I still am. The Valthene wanted war. Let's give it to them." Jake's expression was grim but approving. "When we reach Fleet Command, follow my lead. The Security Council is going to ask you questions. Some will be sympathetic, others will try to find excuses to avoid war. Tell them the truth, but don't let them minimize what happened." The frigate docked at Orbital Command 20 minutes later. They were met by an honor guard and escorted through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy. Officers moved with purpose, their conversations clipped and urgent. News of the Valthene attack had clearly spread. Fleet Command's main briefing room was dominated by a holographic display showing the known galaxy. Red markers indicated Valthene territory, which had expanded significantly in the past 50 years. Blue showed humanity's sphere of influence. Green represented the Corridor Union. Scattered throughout were dozens of smaller species, unaligned and vulnerable. The Security Council sat in a semicircle around the display. Lyra recognized several faces from diplomatic files. Admiral Cheng was there, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Beside her sat General Marcus Holland, head of Earth's ground forces. The others were civilian leadership, politicians, and appointed officials who rarely agreed on anything. Commander Morrison, Admiral Cheng began. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please introduce your companion." Jake stood at attention. "This is Princess Lyra Kent of the Korathi Union, my wife and fellow survivor of the Kepler 442 attack." One of the council members, a thin man with calculating eyes, leaned forward. "We've received your preliminary report, Commander. Quite dramatic, but I have to ask, how can we be certain this wasn't simply a local security failure rather than an empire-wide conspiracy?" Before Jake could respond, Lyra stepped forward. She'd spent her whole life in political circles, navigating the intricate dance of words and implications. She knew what this man was really asking. "Counselor Bryant," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I watched Commander Vex Thorin personally lead shock troops through the diplomatic station, the same Vex Thorin who commands the Balthine Empire's 4th Fleet. The same commander who answers directly to the Balthine High Command. This wasn't a local security failure. This was a coordinated military strike designed to decapitate the forming alliance before it could threaten their expansion." Bryant's expression soured, but another council member spoke up. "Even so, military retaliation could destabilize the entire region. Have we considered economic sanctions? Diplomatic pressure?" General Holland laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Diplomatic pressure against an empire that just murdered 17 species diplomatic delegations? Counselor Hayes, they've made their position clear. They don't want to negotiate. They want to expand, and we're in their way." The debate continued for 20 minutes, various council members proposing alternatives to war. Lyra watched Jake's jaw tighten incrementally with each suggestion. Finally, he'd had enough. "Permission to speak freely?" Jake said, his voice cutting through the discussion. Admiral Cheng nodded. "Granted." Jake activated the holographic display, bringing up tactical data. "The Balthine Empire has spent 50 years conquering minor civilizations. They've refined their approach. First, they identify a target. Second, they isolate it diplomatically. Third, they strike before anyone can organize a response. They've done this 20 times successfully." He highlighted each conquered system as he spoke. The Unity Accords would have changed everything. For the first time, they'd be facing a coordinated defense from species with comparable technology and military capability. So they did what they always do. They struck first. He pulled up images from the attack, and Lyra had to look away. She'd been there, but seeing the carnage from multiple angles made it worse. "This is what they do," Jake continued. "This is who they are. And if we don't respond with overwhelming force right now, we're telling every other species in the galaxy that attacking Earth's allies carries no consequences. We're inviting more attacks, more massacres, more expansion." He looked at each council member in turn. "I've spent 20 years trying to solve problems with words. I'm good at it, but words don't work on an empire that responds to peace overtures with murder. The only language the Balthine understand is force. It's time we spoke it." The chamber was silent. Finally, Admiral Cheng spoke. "Commander Morrison is right. We need to vote." The vote was closer than Lyra expected, 7-5 in favor of military action. But it passed. "Motion carried," Admiral Cheng announced. "We are authorizing Operation Retribution. General Holland, prepare invasion plans for Balthine forward positions. Admiral Kensington, I want our fleet battle-ready within 48 hours. Commander Morrison, you're recalled to active duty. I'm assigning you to the operation as tactical advisor." Jake nodded sharply. "Yes, Admiral." "Dismissed. Commander, Princess Lyra, please remain." The chamber cleared until only the 3 of them remained. Admiral Cheng's stern expression softened slightly. "Jake, I need to know you can do this. You've been out of active combat for 2 decades. Can you still fight?" "You saw my report, Admiral. I fought my way through Valthian shock troops to save my wife. I'm ready. That's what worries me. Chang's eyes were sharp. You're emotionally compromised. They tried to kill your wife. I can't have you making tactical decisions based on revenge. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "It's not about revenge, Admiral. It's about sending a message. The Valthian think they can kill with impunity. We're going to show them what happens when they target the wrong people." He paused. "And yes, it's personal. They came after Lyra. But that doesn't make me less effective. It makes me more motivated to ensure this never happens again." Chang studied him, then nodded. "Very well, but Jake, when this is over, you and I are going to have a long conversation about what you want to be, diplomat or soldier. You can't be both forever." "Understood, Admiral." They left the briefing room and Lyra finally allowed herself to breathe. That was intense. "That was nothing," Jake said. "Wait until the actual planning begins. Military operations at this scale involve thousands of moving parts." He led her through the station toward the guest quarters. "You don't have to be part of this, Lyra. I can arrange transport back to the Karate Union if you prefer." Lyra stopped walking. "Do you want me to leave?" "No, but I'm about to become very focused on planning an invasion. I'll be working 18-hour days, running combat simulations, coordinating with fleet commanders. It's not going to leave much time for anything else." "Then I'll help where I can," Lyra said firmly. "I'm not going back to my people while you're preparing for war. We're in this together." Jake smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his tactical focus. "Together. I like the sound of that." He took her hand. "Come on, I'll show you our quarters. And then I need to introduce you to some people who are going to be very interested in Korathi tactical sensors. If we're doing this, we're using every advantage we have." As they walked through the orbital station, Lyra realized her life had fundamentally changed. She'd married Jake for peace to prevent war. Instead, she'd become part of starting one. But watching the determined expressions of the human officers around her, seeing the careful precision with which they planned their response, she understood something important. Humanity didn't want this war, but they would fight it with everything they had to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And the Valthian Empire, bloated on easy conquests, was about to learn what happened when you picked a fight with a species that had climbed out of their cradle world through sheer stubborn determination. The war was coming, and this time humanity wasn't fighting alone. The war room deep inside Fleet Command buzzed with controlled chaos. Holographic displays showed real-time fleet positions, supply line calculations, and tactical simulations. Jake stood at the center of it all, coordinating 3 different planning teams simultaneously. Lyra watched from an observation gallery above, accompanied by Admiral Chang. "He's in his element," Chang said quietly. "I've known Jake since he was a lieutenant. Brilliant tactician, natural leader. When he retired to become a diplomat, half the general staff thought we'd lost our best strategic mind." "Why did he leave?" Lyra asked. Chang was silent for a moment, her eyes on Jake as he adjusted invasion vectors with quick, confident gestures. After the Titan offensive, Jake's team was sent on a deep strike mission behind Centauri lines. The details are still classified, but it went bad. Really bad. Jake got his people out, completed the mission, but something broke inside him. He came back and told me he was done killing. Said he wanted to find another way to serve. Below, Jake was explaining something to a group of ship commanders, his hands mapping out attack patterns in the air. The officers listened intently, occasionally asking questions that Jake answered without hesitation. "For 20 years, he kept that promise to himself," Chang continued. "Became one of our best diplomats. Prevented 3 wars through negotiation alone. The Karate Union marriage was supposed to be his crowning achievement, the alliance that would finally bring stability to this region." She turned to Lyra. "Then the Valthian forced him back into this world. How's he handling it?" Lyra thought about the man who had killed 20 soldiers to save her, who had moved through combat like death itself. "I think part of him never left this world. He just hid it very well." "That's what I'm afraid of," Chang admitted. Jake is brilliant, but he feels responsibility deeply. Every soldier who dies in this operation, he's going to carry that weight. And unlike 20 years ago, now he has someone he loves who will see that cost. The words hit Lyra harder than she expected. She and Jake had barely known each other when they married. But in the days since the attack, something had shifted. Maybe it was shared trauma, maybe it was seeing him fight to protect her, but what had started as political arrangement felt increasingly real. A junior officer approached the observation gallery. "Princess Lyra, Commander Morrison is requesting your presence in the war room. He needs your expertise on Karathi sensor technology." Lyra descended to the main floor, where Jake was standing in front of a tactical display showing the Valthene forward positions. The Karathi Union space bordered the Valthene Empire along a contested frontier, and her people had spent decades developing sensors capable of detecting Valthene ships through their advanced stealth systems. The problem, Jake was explaining to the assembled officers, is that Valthene ships can mask their engine signatures, making them nearly invisible until they're right on top of you. Standard human sensors can't pick them up until it's too late to mount an effective defense. He gestured to Lyra. But the Karathi have been dealing with this problem for years. "Princess, can you explain your sensor network?" Lyra stepped forward, calling up schematics from her personal data archive. "The Valthene use quantum displacement to hide their thermal signatures. Our sensors don't look for heat or electromagnetic radiation. Instead, we detect the gravitational distortions caused by their faster-than-light drives. Even when a ship is running silent, its mass creates measurable effects on local spacetime." A fleet captain leaned forward. "And this technology can be integrated into our ships?" "With some modifications, yes. The Karathi Union has already authorized technology sharing as part of our alliance agreement. I can have my people send the complete technical specifications within the hour." Jake nodded approvingly, which brings us to the operational plan. We're calling it Operation Retribution, and it's going to hit the Valthene on 3 fronts simultaneously. He activated different sections of the display. First, we take out their forward listening posts along the neutral zone. These installations give them early warning of fleet movements. Without them, they're blind. Second, General Howland picked up, we deploy ground forces to liberate the Helion colonies, the Valais.